Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we're looking at a truly profound reality hidden right in plain sight. Every Sunday, literally millions of people go through a familiar routine, kind of like mindlessly clicking I agree on a spiritual terms and conditions page. But what if I told you there's a deep, cosmic mystery packed into just a few seconds of it? We're unpacking the incredible depths of something you might have honestly thought was just standard liturgy. I'm talking about this incredibly familiar phrase, Lord have mercy. We say it almost every Sunday, right? Sometimes we chant it, sometimes we just whisper it. Christ have mercy, Lord have mercy. It's known as the Kyrie. It basically forms the baseline experience of the Mass for so many of us. It's something we can recite entirely from memory without giving it a single second thought. But here's the thing. We have to ask a challenging question. Do we really understand what happens in that exact moment? Okay, let's dive into this. Because once you grasp the actual mechanics behind these simple words, well, the ancient understanding is that the way you hear them is going to change forever. Let's start with Section 1, a familiar Sunday routine, the mundane phrase with a hidden mechanism. You know, it is so easy for this part of the service to feel like just another repetitive step in the Sunday schedule, just checking a box before we get to the homily or communion. But as we peel back the layers of this mystery, we see it's actually a sharp pivot. It's not just a routine, it's a heavenly intervention. This chant actually operates as a sacred interruption to the justice of God. It's a sudden, deliberate break in the natural order of things. Which brings us right to Section 2, the sacred interruption, pausing the cosmos at the start of Mass. The entire energy of the Mass fundamentally shifts here. It's absolutely not a gentle warm-up, it's a literal cosmic halt. And it happens so early and so abruptly in the timeline of the Mass. I mean, is it the very beginning? It happens before the readings, before the creed actually, even before the altar is kissed again by the priest. The priest raises his voice and cries out 3 times right at the outset, demanding heaven's attention before anything else can proceed. And this shows just how ancient this understanding really is. The early church fathers actually called this moment the cry of the blind man on the road, which is a reference to the Gospel of Luke, chapter 18. They saw this not as some polite liturgical greeting, but as a cry of sheer, unfiltered desperation that literally stopped Jesus in his tracks. So who is actually crying out in this moment? Well, it's a specific triad. It's the cry of the sinner, the desperate, and a world on the edge. The emotional stakes of this prayer are incredibly high. It's the collective voice of humanity reaching out when it has absolutely nowhere else to go. Moving on to Section 3, in persona Christi, the priest as the conduit. So we've established what the cry is and how desperate it is, right? But to understand how this heavenly intervention actually happens, we need to look at this crucial Latin term, in persona Christi, which translates to in the person of Christ. So the crucial point here is that when the priest chants, "You are seated at the right hand of the Father to intercede for us, Lord have mercy," he isn't just a guy reciting words from a book. No, he is acting not as himself, but as the high priest and literal intercessor standing right in the gap between God and the people. And what exactly is he doing in that role? Well, he is lifting up an undeniably heavy emotional weight. In that exact moment, the priest lifts up the pain of the congregation. He lifts up the sins of the entire world, the silent tears of mothers, the hidden shame of sinners, the cries of orphans, widows, and refugees. Let's just take a second to let the absolute gravity of that list sink in. All of that intense human suffering is being gathered up right there at the altar. And then he places all of that pain directly into the wounds of Christ. He invokes Christ the intercessor and pleads not just with words, but with wounds. And because God is just, and justice demands reparation, this act begins those repairs. It literally softens the wrath of God, simply because an intercession has been made. And this brilliantly illustrates the contrast between our modern, kind of casual view of the Mass and what's actually happening in this theological framework. It is absolutely not entertainment or empty tradition or just an emotional experience. It is spiritual warfare. It is active, sacramental reparation. It's a fierce, purposeful action taking place right on a spiritual battlefield. Which brings us to our 4th section, a divine rescue mission, the consequence of the cry. Now this right here is the climax of our explainer, because the priest doesn't do this alone. When the people join in and say, "Lord have mercy," it triggers an epic, cosmic reaction. First, heaven listens. Then, angels literally fall silent. And finally, The gap between the sinful earth and the holy God begins to close. With this congregation's response, the Mass transforms into a true divine rescue mission. When you hear the priest say, "You were sent to heal the contrite of heart," or "You came to call sinners," you aren't just a passive observer sitting in a pew. You are joining a historical lineage. You're joining the ancient cries of the blind man, the leper, and the thief on the cross. These are desperate souls throughout all of history, crying out for healing, salvation, and divine mercy. And because you're joining this incredible lineage, there is a clear, powerful directive for the next time you hear these words. Don't just say the response passively. Pray it, shout it, mean it. It's time to completely abandon that passive Sunday routine we talked about at the beginning and adopt this powerful, active triad instead.
And why should we do this? Well, because a genuine cry yields an immediate response. Just like he did for the blind man on the road all those centuries ago, this participation triggers a definitive three-step divine reaction. Jesus stops, he turns, and he answers.
Let's summarize the core message we've unpacked today. The Kyrie is not just the warm-up for Mass. It is the absolute front line. It's where the Church, wounded and worn, lifts her cry before heaven. It's where the priest, in the name of Christ, holds back the tide of judgment with the cry of mercy. And beautifully, it is where the anger of God begins to turn into the warm embrace of the Father. So we leave you with this provocative question to think about. Next Sunday, how will you cry out? The challenge here is not just to recite the Kyrie, but to really stand in it, to cry through it, and to believe in it. Because sometimes a whispered three-word prayer with your whole soul can actually be the most powerful force in the universe. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep learning.